The security guard, a man I had known by name for 7 years and whose daughter's college recommendation letter I had personally written, refused to look me in the eye. He stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of the lobby, holding a cardboard box containing my coffee mug, a framed picture of my late mother, and my notes. "I'm sorry, Nora," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Davies' orders. Your access badge has been deactivated. I have to escort you off the premises immediately." Upstairs in the glass-walled executive boardroom on the 24th floor, my husband of 9 years, David Davies, was raising a glass of champagne with his brand new 24-year-old assistant, Chloe. He was celebrating the signing of a $20 million tech infrastructure contract with the city's largest investment group. A contract that I had spent the last 14 months negotiating, designing, and coding while sleeping 4 hours a night. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene in the lobby. I took the cardboard box from his hands, adjusted my coat, and walked out into the pouring Chicago rain. As the heavy glass doors closed behind me, I looked up at the glowing logo of Davies Tech Solutions. David thought he had just executed the perfect corporate heist. He thought he had successfully stripped his quiet, loyal wife of her life's work to make room for his new, glamorous reality. What he didn't know was that he hadn't just fired his wife. He had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and he was currently holding it in his teeth. David and I met in college. He was an ambitious, charismatic marketing major with a $1 million smile and a desperate lack of technical capability. I was a brilliant, introverted systems engineer working brutal double shifts at a research lab, obsessed with cloud infrastructure and software architecture. Even back then, I chose to keep my career entirely separate from my personal identity professionally. I always used my maiden name, Nora Vance, under which I had earned my PhD in computer science from Northwestern. When we married, we didn't just build a home. We built a dream. We launched Davies Tech Solutions from a damp basement. The agreement was simple, or so I thought. David would be the face of the company, the charismatic CEO who shook hands and spoke at conferences, while I would be the invisible backbone, the chief technology officer who actually built the code, managed the developers, and designed the proprietary algorithms that made our software valuable. I never cared about the spotlight. I didn't need my name on the building. I just wanted to build a legacy we could pass down to our children. For 9 years, I poured my soul into that company. I watched it grow from 3 employees into a market leader with over 100 staff members and a valuation that made David a multimillionaire. But wealth is a strange lens. It doesn't change people, it unmasks them. The shift happened 6 months ago when David hired Chloe as his personal executive assistant. Chloe was a master of corporate flattery. She wore expensive designer outfits, smelled of heavy French perfume, and spent her days making sure David's coffee was at the exact right temperature and his ego was thoroughly massaged. At first, I ignored it. I was too busy finalizing Project Vanguard, the massive, revolutionary automated logistics platform that was supposed to secure our company's future for the next decade. But then, the whispers started. I began noticing how David would suddenly silence his phone when I walked into the room. I noticed the corporate credit card statements showing luxury hotel stays downtown. During weekends, he was supposedly at regional tech summits. The final confirmation came last night. I stayed late at the office to patch a critical security vulnerability in the Vanguard code. As I walked past David's private office, the door was slightly ajar. Through the gap in the wood, I saw my husband. He was sitting at his desk and Chloe was laughing, leaning over his shoulder as he signed a document. But it wasn't a standard corporate memo. It was a pre-drafted restructuring agreement. "Are you sure she won't fight this?" Chloe's voice had been dripping with mock pity. "Nora?" David had laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that cut deeper than any knife. "Nora lives in her code, Chloe. She's meek. She doesn't have the stomach for a legal battle. Once the city contract is signed tomorrow morning, she becomes redundant. I'll give her a tiny severance package, she'll cry, and she'll walk away. The company belongs to us now." I had stood in that dark hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching the man I had sacrificed my youth for systematically erase me. I didn't confront him then. I walked back to my desk, packed my laptop, and realized that my 9 years of blind loyalty had been a death sentence. And now, standing in the rain outside the building I built, staring at my deactivated badge, I felt the last drop of sadness evaporate from my soul. David thought he was a genius who had outsmarted his quiet wife, but he had made one fatal mistake. In his absolute arrogance, he forgot who actually wrote the software. He forgot who owned the intellectual property. And most importantly, he forgot that an architect always leaves a back door in her own house. The human brain has a fascinating defense mechanism when facing betrayal. It wants to seek answers, to ask why. But as I sat in the kitchen of my quiet, empty apartment that evening, looking at the cardboard box of my belongings, I didn't care about the why. I only cared about the execution. David had spent 9 years capitalizing on my introversion, assuming that because I didn't speak loudly, I didn't think deeply. It was the single most expensive assumption he would ever make. I opened my personal encrypted laptop, the one that had never been connected to the corporate server network, the one David didn't even know existed. For 9 years, while I was building the foundation of Davies Tech Solutions, I wasn't just coding blindly. I was a professional software architect. I knew how corporate structures worked, and more importantly, I knew how fragile intellectual property could be if it wasn't managed properly. I logged into the state's patent and trademark electronic database. I began downloading the original filing documents for the core proprietary algorithm that ran our entire software ecosystem, the engine behind Project Vanguard. And there it was. The first microstrike that would fracture David's illusion of absolute power. When we first started the company in our basement, we didn't have the money to file patents under a corporate entity because the corporation hadn't even been legally formed yet. I had filed the core architectural patents under my own maiden name, Nora Vance. Over the years, as the company grew, David brought in corporate lawyers to transfer our assets. But because I was the one handling the technical filings and he was too busy networking at golf clubs, those specific foundational patents had never been legally assigned to Davies Tech Solutions. The company didn't own the engine, they were just leasing it from me, and that lease was about to expire. But I needed to see just how deep the rot went before I pulled the lever. I needed to know exactly what David and Chloe had done with the new $20 million city contract. I picked up my phone and called Marcus, our lead database administrator. Marcus was a brilliant kid I had personally hired straight out of MIT, saving him from a predatory non-compete lawsuit with another firm. He owed me his entire career, and his loyalty to me was ironclad. Nora, Marcus's voice was a frantic whisper when he answered on the third ring. I heard what happened in the lobby. The whole engineering team is furious. Half the senior devs are ready to walk out right now. David told everyone you stepped down due to personal health issues. It's a total lie. Calm down, Marcus, I said, my voice steady, acting as an anchor for his panic. I need you to do something for me. Do not make a scene. Act normal. But I need to know the exact timeline for the implementation of the new city contract. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on his end. He signed it today, Nora. The City Investment Group just deposited the first milestone payment, $5 million, into the corporate primary account. But something is wrong. Really wrong. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. What is it, Marcus? About 2 hours ago, right after you were escorted out, David ordered a manual override on the financial routing protocols, Marcus said, his voice dropping even lower. He didn't route the milestone payment to the operational R&D accounts like we always do. He routed $3 million of it directly to a newly established shell company registered in Delaware called C&D Creative Holdings. I checked the registration. The beneficial owners are David Davies and Chloe Adams. A cold, sharp shock ran down my spine. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was criminally fraudulent. David wasn't just replacing me in his bed. He was actively embezzling funds from the city's investment contract before a single line of code had even been deployed to their servers. He was setting up a golden parachute for himself and his assistant, preparing to bleed the company dry and leave the fallout to the engineering team. Nora, what do we do? Marcus asked, his breathing shallow. If the city finds out the milestone money is being moved to a private shell company, the contract is void. The company will collapse in 48 hours. You do nothing, Marcus, I whispered, a dark, victorious focus settling into my chest. You copy those routing logs to an external encrypted drive immediately. Then you lock down the main repository. Do not let anyone commit any new code to Project Vanguard. And what about David? David thinks he has a big celebration tomorrow, I said, looking at the calendar on my screen. The annual Shareholders and Investors Gala is tomorrow night at the Blackstone Hotel. He's planning to introduce Chloe as the new corporate director in front of the entire board and the city representatives. Are you going to stop him? Are you... No. I smiled into the dark room. I'm going to let him step onto the stage. I'm going to let him hold the microphone. Because the higher he stands, the louder the crash will be. I hung up the phone. My phone immediately buzzed with a fresh notification. It was an automated email from the corporate HR system, officially signed by David. Dear Nora, your employment separation terms have been finalized. A severance package of $50,000 has been deposited. Please sign the attached non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or the package will be revoked. $50,000 for 9 years of building a multi-million-dollar tech empire. I deleted the email without replying. I didn't need his $50,000. By this time tomorrow, I was going to take back the entire kingdom and leave him with nothing but a pair of silver handcuffs. The grand ballroom of the Blackstone Hotel was a sea of crystal chandeliers, tailored tuxedos, and silk evening gowns. It was the annual Davies Tech Solutions Shareholders Gala, but tonight it doubled as a victory party. Waiters woven through the crowd of over 200 guests comprising our board of directors, major institutional investors, and representatives from the city's infrastructure committee carrying trays of vintage champagne. At the center of it all stood David. He looked immaculate in a custom black tuxedo, his arm wrapped tightly around Chloe's waist. Chloe was practically glowing, dressed in an incredibly expensive emerald green designer dress, sipping champagne and soaking in the attention of the city's elite. They were king and queen of an empire they hadn't built. At exactly 8:30 p.m., the chimes echoed through the room, signaling the start of the presentations. David stepped up onto the elevated stage, taking the microphone as the crowd applauded warmly. Behind him, a massive high-definition projector screen displayed the glowing logo of Davies Tech Solutions and the headline, Project Vanguard, the future of tech infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, and our distinguished city partners, David began, his voice radiating charisma and unearned confidence. Today marks a historic milestone. We have officially secured the $20 million infrastructure contract. This achievement proves that when you have vision, leadership, and a dedicated team, nothing can stop you. Chloe stood just off stage, clenching her hands together with a triumphant, possessive smile. As we move into this bold new chapter, David continued, flashing his trademark smile, I want to announce a leadership transition. My former CTO, Nora, has decided to step down due to personal health reasons. Replacing her as our new corporate director of strategic alliances is the brilliant woman who helped me close this deal, Chloe Adams. The crowd erupted into polite applause, and Chloe began walking up the steps to join him on stage. I'm afraid that position is already filled, David, and so is your seat in the executive office. My voice, amplified by the heavy lapel microphone I had secretly patched into the ballroom's main audio rack through Marcus, cut through the applause like a physical blow. The room went completely stone silent. 200 heads turned in unison toward the grand entrance doors. I walked into the ballroom. My posture was perfectly straight, and I was wearing a sharp, tailored crimson-red blazer over a dark top. I wasn't carrying a cardboard box tonight. I was holding a sleek corporate tablet, and Marcus was standing right behind me with an FBI financial crimes agent. David's face drained of all color. He lowered the microphone slightly, his eyes widening in a mixture of rage and terror. Nora, what is the meaning of this? You are no longer an employee of this company. Security, remove this woman immediately. The security guard stepped forward, but the FBI agent stepped in front of them, flashing a federal badge. "Stand down. This is a formal federal intervention." I walked directly down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor until I stood right at the foot of the stage, looking up at my husband and his assistant. Dr. Vance, the chairman of our board of directors, stood up from the front VIP table, using the professional academic name he had known me by since my days at Northwestern. "What is happening here? David told us you were incapacitated." "David lied to you, Chairman, just like he has been lying to all of you for years," I said clearly, my voice echoing off the high ceiling. I tapped the screen of my tablet. "David just told you that Project Vanguard is the future of this company. What he forgot to mention is that Davies Tech Solutions doesn't actually own a single line of Project Vanguard's core code." The projector screen behind David suddenly flickered. The corporate marketing presentation vanished, replaced by an official, certified digital filing from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. "9 years ago, I designed and patented the foundational architecture of our software system under my own maiden name," I announced, looking directly at the investors in the front row. Because David was too busy playing golf and taking credit for my work, his legal team never executed the intellectual property assignment. The patent belongs to me. And effective at 8 p.m. tonight, I have officially revoked the software usage license for Davies Tech Solutions. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Major investors immediately pulled out their phones, frantically texting their brokers. "This is absurd. It's a technicality. Our lawyers will throw this out in an hour," David shouted into his microphone, his voice cracking under the pressure, sweat visibly breaking out on his forehead. Chloe was backing away toward the curtain, her triumphant smile replaced by an ugly, pale mask of panic. "Your lawyers can try, David, but they'll be too busy defending you against federal grand larceny and embezzlement charges," I said smoothly. I swiped my tablet screen again. The patent document disappeared, replaced by a series of internal financial routing logs and bank wire receipts. 2 hours after I was illegally escorted from the building yesterday, I continued, pointing to the glowing screen, David manually overrode the company's financial protocols. He took $3 million of the city's $5 million milestone payment taxpayer money meant for infrastructure development, fully signed and sealed and wired it directly to a private shell company in Delaware called C&D Creative Holdings, a shell company owned exclusively by David Davies and Chloe Adams. "Oh my God!" a representative from the City Infrastructure Committee gasped, standing up and staring at the evidence. "That's a direct violation of federal contract law." "It's a lie. She hacked the system. She's fabricating this to destroy me," David screamed, turning around and staring at the screen in absolute horror. He turned to Chloe, but Chloe was already trying to slip out the side exit, completely abandoning him. But the exit doors opened, and 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room, blocking her path. The ballroom erupted into total chaos. The flashing lights of smartphones and the murmurs of shocked shareholders filled the air. The chairman of the board turned to David, his face twisted in absolute fury. "David, step away from the podium. As of this exact second, the board is suspending your powers as CEO, effective immediately." The police officers walked up the steps of the stage. The metallic clicks of handcuffs echoed through the silent audio system as they pulled David's arms behind his back. He looked down at me from the stage, his eyes filled with pure, unadulterated hatred and desperation. I didn't look away. I stood tall, my crimson blazer catching the light of the chandeliers, watching his entire, carefully constructed illusion of power dissolve into a massive public disgrace. He had tried to erase the invisible backbone of the company, but he forgot that without the backbone, the entire body collapses. Corporate karma moves at the speed of paperwork, but it never misses its target. With the airtight financial routing logs provided by Marcus and the undisputed patent records under my name, the criminal trial was an absolute slaughter. To save herself from a lengthy prison sentence, Chloe turned state's witness within 48 hours of her arrest. She provided prosecutors with every text message and email showing that David had planned to bleed the company dry and flee the country with her, once the city contract was fully funded. David Davies was convicted of grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in a federal penitentiary and ordered the total liquidation of his personal assets to pay restitution to the city and the shareholders. Chloe received a suspended sentence and a permanent black mark on her record, ensuring she would never work in the corporate sector again. 2 weeks after the final sentencing, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. They didn't just invite me back, they practically begged me to take over. I walked into the headquarters of Davies Tech Solutions soon to be rebranded as Vance Technologies, not as a hidden engineer, but as the chief executive officer and majority shareholder. My first order of business was to reinstate the loyal engineering team, fire the executives who had turned a blind eye to David's behavior, and sign a revised, completely transparent infrastructure contract with the city. Later that evening, I stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive office, looking out over the glittering lights of Chicago. The heavy, suffocating weight of 9 years of unappreciated sacrifice had finally vanished. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I didn't need a charismatic face to hide behind anymore. My work spoke for itself. David and Chloe thought they could exploit a quiet woman's introversion and discard her like an old piece of hardware. But they forgot one fundamental truth. Real power isn't built on expensive suits, empty flattery, and stolen credit. It is built on expertise, truth, and the absolute courage to pull the plug on anyone who tries to diminish your worth. If this story reminded you that no matter how loud the betrayer talks, the quiet architect always holds the keys to the house, drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you are watching from tonight. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next story on EverStory. Good night.